Good afternoon and welcome. First, I'd like to acknowledge the Larangia people as the traditional owners of the Darling region and pay my respects to the Larangia elders past and present. My name is Claire Shaw and I'm the Education Editor at The Conversation. Today I'll be talking more broadly about how to write for all areas of the conversation, and this includes how to save time pitching news story ideas. Can I first get a show of hands for who has written for us before? One. Yes. Great. So lots of potential new authors there. So I'm guessing most of you are here because you're possibly interested in writing for us, or you'd like to find out a bit more about how we work. So I'm also keen to find out if there's anything that has stopped you from pitching a story. So how many of you haven't pitched a story because you don't know how to go about doing it? Yeah. And how many of you are not quite sure about the kind of stories that we're interested in, or the kind of stories that you think you should be pitching? Great, okay. So I'll make sure that I cover all those areas today. So for those of you who aren't as familiar with the conversation, I'll tell you a little bit more. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the conversation, I'll tell you a little bit more about who we are and what we do. So the conversation is a not-for-profit website where journalists work with academics to publish evidence-based articles. It's very much a collaborative partnership with the aim of producing the most interesting and thought-provoking content. So we started off in Australia around 6 years ago, and we now have sites in 4 other countries around the world, including the UK, the US, South Africa, and France. We're also launching a site in Canada, and we have a few others in the pipeline, which could be launching in the next year. So the conversation operates in 2 languages, English and French, and all of our articles are free to read or republish, which is how we reach millions more readers through the global media outlets. Around 4.8 million people read our articles on the conversation each month, and this grows to about 35 million through republications. We've had around 51 academics from CDU write about 133 articles for the conversation over the years, and this has generated over 800,000 article views around the world, which is really strong. And you can see from the map that your articles have attracted readers from many different countries, including the US, New Zealand, UK, and Germany. CDU articles have been republished by 43 publishers, including the ABC, SBS, IFL Science, and Business Spectator. And we're obviously keen for more of you to write and pitch stories to us, and I can tell you more about how to do that today. Here are a few of CDU's best read articles, the top one being the most recent, which is great to see. And the reason why I'm showing you this is to highlight how varied these topics are, and how varied these topics are that have got readers' attention. So here we have pieces that range from talking about the endangered orange-bellied parrot to an explainer on what is VX nerve agent and how does it work. So you're not limited for things to talk about, and the only criteria is that you back up your idea with research. Okay, so how can you write for us, and what are the stories that we are interested in? So each morning, editors have a news meeting to discuss the content that they plan to run that day. Media teams will receive a daily email notifying them of the stories that we want to chase that day, and this likely leads to someone from your media and comms team getting in touch with one of you guys, asking you if you're interested in writing for us. But if you don't get contacted and you have a story that you're interested in writing, then you can pitch your idea via our website. So if you just go onto our homepage, you scroll down to the bottom. On the right-hand side, there's a section called Pitch an Idea, which you can see just there. And when you pitch your story, you'll be asked to outline your idea and talk about its significance, whether it's timely, for example, is it tied to a news event, or is there a new policy announcement that you want to talk about? You'll also be asked which section you want to pitch it to. For example, the education desk, the health desk, science desk, politics desk. You need to be ready to answer the following questions. So what's your story in one sentence? You need to be able to clearly summarize what your main argument is in a sentence. And this kind of tells us that you have a clear idea as to what you want to write about, and also that it helps to focus the story. Our pieces are only around 700 words, so they're quite short, and by doing this it helps you to understand exactly what it is that you want to write about. You also need to consider, is this interesting or significant to non-academic readers? So only around 17% of our readers are academics or researchers, so the conversation is aimed at the general public. So you need to think, is what you're talking about interesting for a broader audience? And do you have any photos or videos or graphs that you want to use in your piece? It's not that great to read a paragraph that is stuffed with stats. So you can think about how to illustrate those statistics in different ways. So sometimes that's by embedding a graphic or a chart. And we have a multimedia team based in Melbourne who can work with you on doing that for you, or you're very welcome to do that yourself and we can just put them into the articles. And you also need to think about, is this issue particularly relevant now, or is it something that's a timeless piece? So if it's tied to a news event, then that's something that we need to be running that week or that day. But if it's something that's just an issue, a general topic, that's not particularly tied to something that's happening now, then we can potentially run that at any point. So it's good to kind of make that clear when you're pitching your idea. And the key thing for us is to make sure that you have a strong argument. Pieces without a strong argument will likely get rejected straight away. So before you pitch your idea, you first need to decide what type of article it is that you're pitching. Is it new research? Is it hooked to a news event? Or do you want to explain a topic that has perhaps been in the news for some reason or discussed recently on TV? Do you want to write a piece because there are some myths that perhaps need to be debunked about a certain issue that keeps coming up in the news? There needs to be a reason why we're publishing the piece. So if you come to us saying, I'm really interested in writing about climate change, obviously this is a much debated topic, there's lots in the media about it comes up in policy debates, so we would want to know, well, we've published loads and loads of articles around climate change, why should we publish this piece now? So you could say, I've just done some new research on it, and I feel like these findings are really interesting and they help move the debate on. Or I've got a new angle to the debate, or there's a conference being held around this particular issue that I would like to tie it to. And there are a few other styles of articles that we run. Listicle style pieces, which are a good way to break down information on a complicated topic. Pieces that provide fresh perspective on a much debated topic. This usually will draw on new research. Again, you'd need to have something new to say in order to do this style piece. Or a fact check. And this is where we get an author to check a politician or influential figure's statement by analysing the latest data available. And these pieces are then blind reviewed by another academic. And we also run regular series, so this is when an editor might get in contact with one of you guys asking you to contribute. We've recently started one called Curious Kids, which has really taken off. And this is where the conversation asks kids to send in questions that they'd like an expert to answer. So a few questions we've had so far include, why are some shells smooth and some shells corrugated? why don't cats wear shoes? Bullshit question. Does space go on forever? And where does money come from? And academics have to answer those questions in 700 words, so quite a challenge. And so the key thing for us is that we're not looking for opinion pieces. All pieces, as I mentioned before, need to be evidence-based analysis pieces that provide a new perspective on an issue or add to the debate in some way. So I've got a short video on how a fact check works. Just bear with me as I do that.
Here at the conversation. Here at the conversation, we think it's important to be transparent about how we do journalism. So today I'm taking a minute to tell you about how we do our fact checks and how we make sure they're accurate. We do fact checks to provide reliable information and correct the record if we're being misled. It isn't about gotcha journalism, but to be useful, fact checks have to be something you can trust. So we set a very high bar for evidence. First, our editors and readers identify a claim worth checking. Then we find an academic with real expertise to examine the evidence and write the fact check. And we also give the person we're fact checking the right of reply. Next, we ask a second academic to be a blind reviewer. They scrutinise the draft, looking for omissions, bloopers or bias, without knowing who wrote it. And throughout the whole process, our fact check editors play devil's advocate, double-checking the author's work, pushing the experts to defend their reasoning, and improving the sourcing and keeping out unwanted opinion or jargon. After final checks by another editor, we publish the fact check under the name of the author and the blind reviewer. Above all, we want to be fair and accurate, so you get the facts you can trust. Have you seen a claim worth checking? Let us know at checkit@theconversation.edu.
So there's a small technical glitch. Okay, so this is the point where your idea gets either accepted or rejected. So editors are notified of pitches and have to respond within 48 hours. We get a lot, so don't be too concerned if you get knocked back. This is a screen grab of one of our editors' inbox. So we have to prioritise the best pitches and the ones that are the most newsy and relevant to our audience. So for me, sometimes it is just a resource problem. I edit the education site single-handedly, so I just can't realistically accept all pitches. But if you do get accepted, this is how it works from this moment on. So we work with authors on putting together a brief, so we're both clear on how the piece will be structured. This part is crucial to ensure that we are both on the same page and that we ensure that expectations are met. And this can happen on the phone or by email, whichever you feel more comfortable with. So if after this step you send back a piece that has nothing to do with the brief that we agreed on, then it's most likely that it probably will get rejected at this point because there's usually a reason why we have agreed to focus on a specific angle. And because this helps the editor to plan their content schedule for the week ahead and also to make sure there won't be any crossovers with content. So we've agreed on a brief, and now you need to go ahead and write the piece. So this is what an article looks like behind the scenes. This basically works in a very similar way to Microsoft Word document. And this is essentially the back end of the editing system. And this is where we add the article text and the headline and picture, and also the author's profile, which you can see there on the right-hand side. And at the top you can see 4 tabs here: history, edit, preview and mobile. So when you click on edit, that's where you actually write the piece. When you click on preview, that will show you what the article will look like when it's going to be published. And if you click on mobile, that will show you what the article will look like if someone reads your piece on mobile. So sometimes the format changes slightly so it fits onto a smaller screen. And if you click on history, that will show you any changes that you've made. So all changes You can see all changes that are made by both the editor and the author. And you can see this bar here, which will show you who's edited when. And this is a dual editing system, so everything is saved automatically, and you can scroll back and see any changes that have been made by either yourself or the editor. And this means you can also go back and find any paragraphs you may have deleted, or some text that you want to go back and perhaps put back in. So all articles should be accessible for a 16-year-old to read. This is our readability tool there, where it says 95, it goes up to 100. And so it starts at red, which means if your article is on red when you paste it in, it means it's not that accessible. If it goes to orange or amber colour, it means it's okay, but it could be improved. And green is ideally where you want it. So green is normally around 78. So how can you increase the readability index? There's a few really simple things that you can do. For example, including short, simple sentences, breaking up your paragraphs, removing jargon, and just making sure that you explain every point really clearly, and reducing the number of acronyms that you use, which I know can be difficult, definitely from editing the education section. There are a lot of acronyms. But if you're reading a piece where every sentence includes an acronym, it's really hard to stay focused on the piece, and quite often you might just give up. And we want to obviously keep our readers on the page. So you need to make it kind of as easy as possible for them to read the piece. So the editor of the section will then go through and edit the piece to our style, and add a headline and a picture. And we want to do as little editing as possible, and ensure that we do keep the author's voice throughout. But we quite often will do a bit of restructuring to ensure that the argument is clear from the start. So how you structure academic articles, kind of the opposite to how you write an article for the media. So for us, the main finding is mentioned right at the start. And then the context is put further down, and we might end on some solutions. Whereas, for an academic article, you can tend to build up to the findings, which are discussed more towards the end. The main reason is because readers have short attention spans, and you lose them very quickly. So you want to make sure the most interesting and important part of your piece, the research findings, they're mentioned towards the start of the piece. And when the piece is finished, you must disclose any potential conflicts of interest. So this applies to all authors writing a piece. For example, if you've received government funding for a research project that you are talking about in the piece, then you need to disclose that. And you only need to disclose things that are related to this specific article. And the reason for this is just to ensure that we are open and honest to our readers about who is writing about what. And when you are happy with the piece, you have to tell us by hitting the approve button, which an editor will send to you in an email. And all authors get final approval on their article. We can't publish a piece without it being approved by the author. So when you click this button, this tells us that everything you're saying in the piece is factually correct, and that you are happy for it to be republished. Published, not republished. And this is how we're quite different from mainstream media, where you wouldn't usually get this opportunity. I used to work for The Guardian, and it was up to us when we decided to publish a piece. We didn't go to the author for them to read through the final version. So this is how we're trying to build a relationship with our authors and check that they are happy with exactly what is being put out there. Okay, so why write for us? Well, we've talked first of all about how the conversation works and how to write for us. and the types of stories that we are potentially interested in. But then why should you write for us, and what are the benefits? So first of all, every author gets their own public profile. I've used Martin. Hopefully he doesn't mind. So this is what all the profiles will look like on the conversation. And it's helpful to include contact details for the media and other academics looking to talk to you about the research you are doing. It's also worth going into a bit of detail about the research in the bio section, about your research in the bio section, so that readers just know what you're talking about. When you saw the screen earlier, the section where you were writing the article in, you saw that it had the academic byline on the side. Readers will quite often click on that and say, okay, who is this person? You know, why are they writing about this issue? So when they get to that, they come to this section here, and so they can see, oh, they're writing about this subject because they're an expert in that area, and they've done lots of research around it. And you can also check out how each of your pieces are doing by viewing your author dashboard. So you access this dashboard by just logging into your profile. You can look at where your content is being read, on the right-hand side there, how many people are reading it and commenting, and whether it is being republished. And this can get quite addictive. Keep refreshing the page just to see how many more people are reading your pieces and tweeting and commenting. And you can see this example here that Martin has included 3 engagements, just this box here. And this box is for authors to update themselves to show the impact their articles have had. So, for example, one of the pieces of engagement that Martin included was that he explained that the piece he wrote, his last piece, which explained that BX nerve agent was following the news story that Kim Jong-nam was assassinated using that poison. He was interviewed by Channel 7 and GQ for background information about the nerve agent, and the ABC interviewed him on the Darwin Local Light evening show about poisons and their effects generally. The ABC were also interested in talking to Martin about his research on Northern Territory medicines. So it's a pretty good outcome for a single piece. So again, why write for us? Because you will be able to talk about your research to the general public, and you can see the top 10 and the general public around the world as well. So you can see the top 10 countries by readership on the screen. Top 3, Australia, US and UK. And we've also got readers in New Zealand, Germany, Philippines, India, South Africa, and so forth. So most of our readers are teachers, business and media people, as well as policymakers. And a few are academics, as I mentioned before, just around 17%. So it is important to not aim these articles at your colleagues, although they may be reading them. The purpose of the conversation is to inform the public about new research that is going on. And because we're aimed at the general public, this is why all of our content needs to be accessible. And if you write for us, there is a possibility that your research will be republished by other well-known media organisations. We have over 22,000 republishers from all over the world, and these include The Guardian, The Washington Post, Time, ABC, and CNN. So this means your article can get shared very widely. We also have an ABC staff member based in our Melbourne office who helps get our pieces republished by the ABC. So in the last 3 months of 2016, we had over 4 million more article views for the conversation by the ABC. So this is a win-win situation for both the conversation and the ABC. they get more content, and we get to distribute our content more widely. So interestingly, readers spend more time reading our articles that were republished on the ABC than they do reading content produced by the ABC. With the opportunity to have your work republished by the wider media, it doesn't really matter where you are based. With a good story, you can attract readers from all around the world. And we've even had pieces translated into German and Chinese. This is alongside our French site, which also frequently translates content from other conversation sites into French. And so there's an opportunity to reach a really huge global audience. And we know that academics are under increasing pressure to show that their research is having impact. So writing for the conversation is a way to share your research findings with new audiences, to practice talking about your work in an accessible way, and to see it have impact. And this is in this example here, an academic was offered deals with Microsoft and Amazon to deliver a startup using their platforms after writing an article for us about his research. So and we've also had many authors sign book deals after writing for us. So there are plenty of opportunities, and you may end up with more than just an article. And it's also a way to get more people reading about local research. So the hook to this piece was that Tony Abbott was visiting North East Ireland in the hope, quote, to not be just the Prime Minister, but the Prime Minister for Aboriginal Affairs. This was in 2014. So at that time, we asked experts, what stories does the Prime Minister need to hear while he's in the top end? So there were a series of articles, and this was one of them. This piece was about the Aboriginal birth cohort study, which followed the progress of 686 babies into adulthood and checked for earlier signs of chronic disease. It was read by over 8,000 people and shared over 600 times on Facebook. So writing can provide a platform to talk about your local research and aim it at a much bigger audience. And we also have important people that are hopefully reading our content. We have over 123,000 followers on Twitter, from the Prime Minister to comedian Ricky Gervais. And even Google is impressed. This is a quote by Google's head of news. So a little bit more about how we work. So we have to reply to pitches within 2 working days. We tend to reject around 50 to 90% of pitches we receive. So again, don't get disheartened if you do get rejected. The 90% figure is kind of related more to the education desk, which I edit. Rejection rates tend to be higher because education is very cyclical. You may have heard Godsky come up just a few times over the past few years. So this means that the same debates come around again and again and again. We want to make sure that we are actually adding to the debate. So if it's something that we have covered before and there is no new research to move the debate on, we will likely reject it. But I and a lot of other editors tend to commission out a lot of our pieces, so you'll quite likely be contacted by one of us asking you to write a piece. How quickly can we publish? It can be on the same day if it's tied to a news event, or it can take weeks. It really depends on the type of piece that you're writing and whether it's newsy or not. And our articles aren't long, they're only around 700 words, so they need to be written in a clear and concise way and have a strong focused argument. We are happy to include pictures and videos and embed tweets and graphs and work with you on making your piece stand out in a different way. And like I said before, we can help you work with our multimedia teams. So few things to remember before pitching and writing stories. Don't pitch a week after a policy announcement has been made. We are a news site, so we do need to talk about the new policy announcements when they happen. This is because if we publish something a week after an announcement has been made, that's old news by then. All the media have already covered it, so why would someone then want to read about it a week later? There has to be a reason why we're writing it. So for us, it might be turned into more of an analysis piece and going, okay, so this announcement was made, but what impact is that having? What does the research say about this? How is this going to impact on certain communities or certain types of people? So for us, we tend to then use our pieces to move the debate on slightly. We want to inform non-experts, so don't write in a language that will alienate our readers. This is not about dumbing down. It's about clearly talking about your research in an accessible way. And if there is no way to talk about your research in lay language, then maybe the conversation isn't the best place to pitch that particular idea. But I would argue that there is always a way to talk about complicated topics. You just sometimes have to be a little bit creative with your writing and about how you perhaps visualize the piece that you want to. Maybe it's about including an infographic to explain something more clearly. And also try not to send us a draft article before you pitch us your idea. So we get quite a few people doing this. And this takes up quite a lot of our time because academics frequently want feedback on why that article wasn't right for us. So we much prefer to work with the author on the story idea to ensure that we are focusing on the most interesting angle. We don't want to waste anyone's time. It's not great if you spend ages drafting a piece, send it to us, and then we say it's not right for us, but we weren't aware that you wanted to write that for us. So if you pitch your story to us first, then we'll save us both time as we can decide there and then and say, okay, that's great, it works for us, or it's not quite right for us, or we have 10 other people writing about that for us. So we want to make sure that we're not wasting anyone's time. So there's also an opportunity for your work to be included in an annual book that we publish, and it features some of our best pieces of the year. That one in the middle, 50 standout articles from Australia's top thinkers, was the one that we published last year. So a final tip. A good way to find out about the stories we are covering is to sign up to our newsletter. This comes out every morning, and that way you will know what we are covering and what hasn't yet been covered. And it also might give you some ideas for articles. And you can also follow us on Twitter at @conversation.edu, and you'll see all of our stories being tweeted out there as well. Thank you for coming, and I hope you found the talk useful, and open to any questions if anyone has.
So with a pitch, you shouldn't, we're not having to identify what section or anything or a particular editor, you just put your pitch in and leave it at that.
So in the pitch section, at the bottom it will say which section would you like to aim this at. So if you think it's more of a science piece, you would click science, but if that then is sent through to the science editor and they think it's quite suited to science, they think it's more health, they will then forward it on themselves to the health editor. So it's just about what you think is the right section to aim it at, but it will always get passed on to the appropriate one in the end. Yeah.
Okay.
It was really useful to see that screen that you see about when the pictures
Oh,
come
yeah.
through.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, that's what you see. Would it be likely that something would get rejected just at that point without it even being opened up?
No, because all we see is new pitch and then the subject that you've decided to write, but that's not enough for us to reject it. We have to open it and read it and then make a decision about rejecting it. So I think one thing I can emphasize today is to make your pitches as great as they can be and to really sell the story. I think quite a lot of pitches I receive probably are great stories, but I reject them on the basis of how they're presented to me. So if I don't know that it's based on new research, if I don't know that it's like a huge study that's taking place and it's like one of a kind in Australia, that's a real shame because it could have been then a great piece, but because we get so many, I haven't got time to then kind of do my own research looking into it. So I think in the pictures, you know, sell it. Say this is a new research that I'm focusing on. It's had this impact. These are the key findings. This is why the general public should be interested in knowing about this.
Thanks.
Do you look at the author's profile before making a decision on whether to accept or reject the pitch?
I look at the author's profile to see if they've written for us before,
Right.
because that tells me if they understand how we work or if they don't understand how we work. I look at the profile to see if they are writing within their research area. So we only want academics to pitch within their research
Right.
area. We don't want a scientist writing about school policy. So we want to get the people who know the most about that area to write for us. So the only reason I'll be looking at it is to find out about their research area, to see if they've done lots of recent research in that area, or whether it was one journal they published 20 years ago. So that's the main reason, yeah.
So all the editors think the same way, or is it just you?
No, yeah, I would think so.
All right, thank you.
The site's called The Conversation. Is there, do you encourage a conversation between, say, readers and the authors? What sort of interaction is there? Or
Between readers and the authors?
yeah. Is there a forum for that to discuss the article? Or
Well, at the bottom,
readers send feedback in?
readers do send feedback. At the bottom of the article, we have comment section, so anyone is able to comment on that particular article. We do encourage the author to also get involved. Obviously, sometimes people don't like to do that. We do have a comment moderator who is employed on a full-time basis in our Melbourne office, so they make sure that they delete any comments that are abusive, off topic, in any way offensive. So, and we've got quite strict on that because we know that sometimes that acts as a deterrent. A lot of people don't like to write if they know that they're going to receive a lot of trolls and a lot of negative comments. And so, sometimes we do shut comments down completely because they get out of hand, and that's not useful for anyone. The point is to have an informed debate about that particular article. It's not to talk about something else that's unrelated. And we also encourage on the dashboard that I showed earlier, where it has engagements, and we encourage people to write in there any feedback that they've had from authors, and we will get in touch with the academic if we've received some really lovely emails from the general public talking about the piece. And quite often other academics want to be put in touch with an author because they're working on a similar research area, so they want to connect and perhaps work on a piece together.